Hello and welcome to AGamerDraws. My name's Sarah and I'm a gamer who draws. So it's been requested that I do some videos on manga and manga tutorials. I've already done a video on faces, like the general face proportions and stuff, so if you want to see that, click here. This video is going to focus on a little technique that I learned right at the beginning of starting manga that helps to sort out torsos. Okay, so I'm going to keep this in real time so you can see what's going on. So the technique starts off with a circle for the head, a triangle for the body, and then a circle for the hips area. Now, I find that these shapes are really useful for me because the triangle at the top tells you where the shoulders are going to be, and at the bottom it tells you where the base of the torso is going to be. Then the circle reminds you that the hips are like a 3D object, and then you've got that nice little dip in that tells you where the hips are. Now, I'm going to show you a whole bunch of seated positions, and this is actually the first seated position that I learned when I was studying manga. So as you can see here, I'm kind of mapping out the body's locations using straight lines. Now, as you get further into working with manga, you probably end up not doing that anymore and using more 3D objects that you kind of combine, or using loose lines. But I find this very simple and easy to read if you're learning. Now, one of the things you want to keep in mind is where the center of the body is. So for me, I'm drawing this girl facing at kind of a 45-degree angle. So I'm drawing in a line to remind me that that's where the front of the body is. Now, I want you to think about the fact that this is a 3D space. So the character, you're not drawing straight lines for each of the body parts. So if you look at the thigh where I've drawn it, the top of the thigh sort of rises up and curves, and then the bottom of the thigh also curves, but not in the same locations. By the way, I apologise if I sound a little weird. I've been sick for about a week, so hopefully that isn't coming through too much. Something that helps me when drawing this is to think of the character as if they're in like a really tight swimsuit. And you can see here I've kind of drawn in some of the back lines that you wouldn't actually see at the end, but it's just to remind me that they're there and that there is this full 3D character. Now, do rub out lines as you're working along, because I find that if you've got too many construction lines as you're drawing, it can get in the way of everything. When I'm drawing the feet, I like to try and keep it simple, especially the hands as well. When you're just trying to plot out the character, just draw the absolute basic shapes, like mittens for hands and these little paddles for feet, because that means you don't get too caught up in the nitty-gritty, and instead you're thinking about the silhouette of the character and the overall shape. Now, I said a few times that this is a 3D space, so here I'm making sure that the character is leaning on something in my mind. Like the area where she's sitting lines up with where her hand is curving, so that you get this sense of correct weight distribution. Now, something that can help you when you're drawing the shoulders is to draw in the collarbone. I've actually drawn it in a little bit high here, but that's just because I find that helps me, and then in the final piece I'll bring the collarbone down. But I find that it helps me to remember that the neck is cylindrical, and that you want to make sure that you include that. So now you can see that I've drawn this character seated here, her legs crossed. This was actually one of the first things that I learned to draw when it came to manga. And by the way, if you're seeing anything that reminds you of the How to Draw manga books, I believe they're by Graphic Shah. That's because that was actually the series that taught me how to draw manga. That was what I sat down and studied at home. So if you see anything that looks very similar to that, that's why. So the next drawing I'm going to draw a girl sort of stretching, and this is going to give more interest to the body. When you're drawing a character, you want to think about where that line of motion is in the body. So if we just watch here, I'll draw in the face as the circle, and then I draw in the line of motion, and that's to tell me this is where I want the energy to be moving. Next, I'm drawing in the shoulders, and something that I find that helps me to draw the shoulders is to draw a sort of a hood across from the top of the crown of the head to the outside of the triangle. And if that looks too wide or too shallow, then I'll adjust the triangle accordingly. Now I've gone down to the base of the triangle and I'm looking at where the knees should be. Now, something to remember is that if your character is moving their legs up or anything like that, they will have it in front, they will have their features in front of other features. So, sorry, that wasn't just explained very well. As you can see here, the thigh is raised, and that means that the knee is almost at the same level as maybe the navel or something like that. You can also see I've drawn two little lines above. That's where I'm making sure that the rib cage is included. It's very important to make sure that your characters, even no matter how exaggerated they are, they still have all of the components to be a living, breathing thing, you know? Make sure that they've got a rib cage, make sure that they've got proper hip locations. Even if you shrink it down, relative to other parts of the body, it should make sense. Now, something that I find that helps when you're trying to make a character more interesting is to have the body facing in a different location than the head, so that you get this kind of stretch reaching through the body, and you can see her kind of looking up as her body twists, and I find that to really make an image interesting. When drawing in the shoulders, and this is also something that I find with knees as well, it's important to remember that it isn't a spherical object, it's not just a ball, and when you're practicing and learning, it's really tempting to just draw a little circle and then you end up with these really uniform bumps. Instead, think of it as the muscle, as if it's stretching. So if you look at where I've drawn the shoulders, you can see that they sort of taper out, and that helps to be able to tell where the breast muscle will join into the shoulder muscle. When drawing the arms as well, remember that they're not the same shape on either side. So I've got this kind of higher bump closer to the face and a sort of elongated bump on the outside, and it helps to really study anatomy, life drawing, and also using websites where you can use gesture drawing. That will really help in picking up on those little techniques. Okay, so the next character that I'm going to look at is someone who looks like they're thinking. That was kind of the idea of it, and I wanted to look like they were thinking about whether they wanted to sit down or stand up. So again, we're using the triangle and the circle. The triangle at the front I've curved outwards, and the reason why I'm doing that is it's so that you can sort of see the bend in her back. So if you think of the left hand side as the front of her body and then her head facing to the right. Now I'm drawing in the floor slightly just to remind myself that that's where the feet should end. I decided in this one, because I haven't done it in the previous ones, to put the hand, or at least one of the arms, in front of her body. And you can see that I've just done the straight line with the little paddle for her hand. Drawing the cross across the face, that's hard to say, really helps to remind yourself which way you want your character to be facing. And remember, this is just messy plotting out. Feel free to scribble and doodle and whatever, as long as you can read it. Now I'm drawing in the body, and As you can see in the arm, I've tried to make it so you can see where the elbow should be. I've got little bumps on either side, but I'm keeping them smooth, and that's really important to remember. Choosing where to put the breasts can really help in reminding people which way your character is facing. So you can see that I've raised that area on the left hand side for us to show that that's where her body is facing. Now I'm working on where the thighs are. If you wanted to make this character look like she was sitting properly, then I'd raise her knees up so that they're much more in line with the straight line of the area that she's sitting. If you wanted to make it look more like she was ready to stand and walk away, then lower one of the hips down, or make it so that one of the legs is straighter and looks like it's bearing weight, if that makes sense. So by using a long straight curve, you can make that leg look like it's being leant on, and you'll usually see one side raised and of the hips, and then you end up with this concave in that side of the body, and that's how you show that there's that weight there. But instead I've decided to go for this sort of, she's thinking about what she wants to do. It's kind of an in-betweeny pose. Now, all of our characters so far have been facing generally in our direction. So for the next character, I'm going to look at drawing the back. I'm going to keep the arms mostly out of the image so it's easier to see the back lines. So draw the circle and the triangle just as normal. Now, what I want you to think about is how backs curve, and how at the base of the back you've got this kind of sharp in curve, and then it goes out towards the top. That's the kind of shape that you want to represent with the triangle and the circle. Now, as you're looking at the shoulders, you'll find that they're sort of like, they're fairly straight, but if you want them to be relaxed, you can just droop them slightly. Now I'm focusing on that side where we can see more of the silhouette of the back. And you want to remember that there's the shoulder blades in there. So I tend to just do the very most subtle little bump to represent that. Then I'm drawing in the bum and round. And then I'm going up towards the back, drawing in this line where the spine would be. Now, something to remember is that you make sure that there is this sort of rounded area towards the top. And you can see I've just drawn this little line across. That's to remind myself that there has to be that area for the lungs in there again. So if we look over at the girl stretching and then back at this girl sitting facing away from us, you can see how that little torso lung area moves across and how you need to make sure that's always there. And I'm rubbing it out afterwards to make the rest of the lines more obvious. So I've done a few little lines to represent the shoulder blades, and then I'm doing a couple little dimples just above the bum area and next to the spine, because you will see that every now and then in women. I think it helps to show that it's the back. Also, don't forget to draw in what you can see of the thigh, if you can see anything. Now let's go down to the floor to draw some different seated positions. So I'm drawing in the head as sort of a angle, so it looks like she's looking off into the distance, and then I'm drawing in the body. Now, something to remember to kind of develop the triangle and circle technique is that you can sort of draw like an oval towards the top to remind you where the breasts should be. And that also helps if you're looking at the character maybe from really high up, then drawing that circle along can remind yourself that you may not be able to see the front of the neck, and you may need to bring the circle of the head down into the triangle to make the perspective look right. Now I'm drawing this girl cross-legged, so you can see that I've just done a very simple couple lines to represent that before I start moving in. Things like this, where it's a more complicated design, it is important to use construction lines. You can use a different technique called like sculpting. I find that's really useful when you're working digitally, but if you're just learning, this can be really helpful. So I'm drawing relaxed shoulders, so again I'm drooping them down into the arms, and I'm using these sort of tapered ovals, there we go, to represent the shoulders, and that really helps to get the correct shape. Now I'm about to look at where the feet are, but first let's look at how I put the hands there. I've made sure that when she's touching the ground, it's in the correct location, so always think about the overall space that your character takes up. Now to help myself, I have done that little trick I said earlier and imagining her in a swimsuit. So I've drawn these sort of curves at the very tops of her hips so that I can show the curve of her thighs. I'm drawing in sort of a lump where the leg is bent so that you can see that there is the calf there. And then I'm going in and drawing in the other knee and the other leg kind of crossing across. And you'll only see like bits of each part when you've got crossed legs, like little bits of the foot, little bits of the knees. But try looking at photography and things like that, actual images of these characters to help you. Now the next character that I'm going to look at is someone who is kneeling. So let's start off with the circle as normal, our triangle, and then the circle at the bottom. Now, I actually made a mistake here, and you can see it, I immediately spot it and rub it out. When you're drawing kneeling characters, because the knees are probably coming towards you, you want the lines to be splaying out rather than tapering in. So make sure you don't make that mistake. I'm drawing in the head, making sure that it balances with the body. It can help to add in the back of the cranium to remind yourself that it is a solid object and the neck is in the middle. And then I'm drawing in the shoulder and the arms as normal. Now I decided to put the arms behind the character this time so you can see more of the body. So again, I've drawn that line of action through the body to show us where the front is. And then next I'm looking at the shape of the knees. Now I like to draw these kind of, they're not ovals, but they're kind of like, I don't know, they're kind of boxy ovals. I don't know how to describe it. You can see it there on the right one in particular. I find that they really help to describe the shape of the kneecap. Make sure that all the body parts that you're drawing are nice and round and they really look like solid objects. There's a few techniques like the spiral techniques that can help you to do this. I'm making sure that everything looks in shape and in line. I've made sure that the knees are sitting across from each other and that the foot is up back against, if you imagine all the girls are sitting on a wall, that foot's against the wall because then her knees protrude forward. And now the final character that I'm going to show you is laying on her front and we're looking at her side. So if you look at the shape of the circle and the triangle in relation to each other, I've tried to represent this by making the bottom of the triangle straight across the floor and it's bending at the top of her body, curving down and then to the circle which represents her hips. Now I'm drawing the shoulder in as that elongated little oval thingy thing and pulling it forward to show where the elbow is, and then I'm drawing the other hand just laid across on top of that, And remember to have that arm covering the face so it looks like she's burying her face. I'm not keeping the bottom of the body completely straight. I'm leaving lumps for where the breast tissue would be, where maybe the bottom of her tummy would be, and also curving that thigh as well. So the back of the thigh is kind of voluptuous and curving out, whereas the bottom of the thigh, because she's bending her legs back, is more stretched and curves away from her body. And then I'm drawing the back feet in very quickly here, but you can sort of see the shape that it's going for. And then rub out the lines that are maybe making it a little more messy. So I hope that helped, and if you use these kinds of techniques, you should be able to draw anime girls sitting in whatever position. I actually use this for standing positions as well, but I thought this would represent it best. Anyway, I hope this helped, and I'll see you again next week. Bye!